Hello everyone, my name is Barby. As you probably already know, there have been moments in my life I wanted to change my name, but now I think that works kind of perfectly. It's like an oxymoron. Somebody had Dry said that to me once. I took it and I ran with it. Anyways, so as you know, or you might not know, I have a PlayStation 5, and when I first got the PlayStation for Christmas, I was very, very excited about downloading pretty much everything that I possibly could download, but I did have a couple of choice games in mind I wanted to play. I really like butterfly effect games, like games where you can choose your path and everything that you say and do matters in the culmination of the ending. So I try to get the best ending possible. I try to play these games as though I was doing it in real life. I try to think the way that I would if it were actually me in those situations, and honestly, more often than not, it leads to pretty okay endings, but this time, not so sure. So anyways, the game I played is called Until Dawn. This was actually very popular when it first came out back in like 2014, 2015. So I kind of was a little bit late to the party, but I never really knew what it was about. I had heard of it from my brother, but like I said, I'm really bad at shooter games. I'm really bad at games where you have to fight stuff. And so I was kind of under the impression that that was the type of game that it was. I was actually very wrong. It is a butterfly effect game, which, as I explained before, does mean the choices you make have a very, very strong impact on how the story ends. So it was pretty much exactly what I was looking for. In addition to this, I got most of the Dark Pictures anthology, and I got The Quarry, which is the second game in line to Until Dawn. Not quite a sequel, but along those lines. So this game is set in this winter paradise type situation where you and your friends are in a cabin, and the whole purpose of the trip is to kind of try to get everybody back together after two sisters that they had been friends with priorly disappeared the year before. Disappeared being the operative word, because very quickly in the game you find out that they actually met their ends by falling off of a cliff. That's not a spoiler because that's how we open. However, that's unbeknownst to the rest of the cast. So it does operate kind of like a movie. Everybody is played by an actor. While it is CGI, it looks extremely realistic to the actual actors themselves, right down to the little quirks of their faces. Some names you might recognize include Hayden Panettiere and Megan Martin. The first thing I want to say is that I have a thing where I'm very critical about horror movies. I'm very, very critical about dialogue that just feels rushed or sucks, etc., isn't well thought out. I believe that the people in Until Dawn are supposed to be fresh out of high school, if I remember correctly. So they're a bit younger. They're not exactly your typical teenagers, but they are maybe 19, 20, around those lines. That's what I got out of it. I could be mistaken, but that's what I got out of it. So as is customary in horror films, they look much older than that, and probably were much older than that when it was being made. However, like, the illusion still doesn't really escape you too much. There are a few that look like they fit their roles. So I do want to say that the dialogue at first was paining me so hard. It literally hurt me so bad. Like, physically, I almost did not want to play this game. I took a lot of breaks. There are so many stereotypes woven into it, like, you know, typical white girl is all whiny because her boyfriend doesn't want to spend time with her. Cough, Jess, cough. There's also this other really, really whiny girl who is like, come on, it was just a prank. And you know, it gets kind of cliche. So it starts out a little bit insufferable. I was determined to actually play this game and have fun with it, so I had to kind of sift through all the shitty dialogue, and if that's something that bothers you, you're gonna have to sift through it too. Sorry, it's just the way it was created, I guess. Now, I don't know why these developers feel that teenagers / young adults talk that way. In my experience, it's not so, but whatever. I could not script the game, and if I had, I would have written it much differently. Mind you, though, once you get past the kind of cliche and overused dialogue and the whiny, somewhat entitled personalities of a few of the characters, you do find some gems. I want to say that Sam, Hayden Panettiere's character, was very likable. I wanted to save her. I almost saved her, and then I didn't, which we'll get to. There's other characters named Chris and Ashley who I also really enjoyed. Josh is interesting, to say the least. At first, he's just about as annoying as everybody else, but then once you find out more, you're like, oh shit, this took a turn, and a dark one. So if you don't know what Until Dawn is about, it's primarily about a mythical creature called the Wendigo. There is actually a man in the game that utters the quote, "This mountain does not belong to the Washingtons." That was the last name of the family who had previously perished there. This mountain belongs to the Wendigo. I actually didn't know too much about the Wendigo when I was going into this, which is probably something I should be a little bit ashamed of myself for, as I love folklore, I love talking about it, I love reading about it. I did not know the first thing. I did some research on the Wendigo after playing this game. So there are a couple of inaccuracies, but also, depending on what story or what version of folklore you're reading about the Wendigo from, there's a lot of things that differ. So I don't think it's something that you can really pin down to an exact science. In this game, for all intents and purposes, the Wendigo is kind of like this skinny, leathery creature that looks like it might be kind of human, but it's not, and it's also kind of an animal, but not really. It's something completely separate from either of those things, and it is after you and your crew. And to be fair, a lot of things start happening that kind of don't make much sense, make you suspect there might be some kind of serial killer here with you. There might be some kind of maniac on the loose. And although that's not totally inaccurate, the one thing you gotta remember is that it's a creature you're up against. You are up against creatures, and they're going to show their faces sooner or later. One thing I really did like about this game is that it teaches you all the mechanics, but it also tells you there are certain times when it's best to do nothing. For instance, there is a scene where you have the option of stabbing something or not stabbing said thing. So I went about this two ways. First, I stabbed it to see what happened, and it was catastrophe. Then I went back, and I didn't really like how that panned out. So I was like, why do I necessarily have to strike? So I did not stab it, and then we got a bit of a better outcome. So it's worth mentioning and remembering that just because it says, oh, here's a button, you should hit it, doesn't mean that you have to hit it. You have to use your critical reasoning skills to decide, is this what I really want to do? What will happen if I do this? And that was probably the part I was best at. I was also good at kind of choosing dialogue, choosing not to pick fights and things like that, but there were some moments where I faltered. For example, there are some times where the game will cut off what it's doing and ask you to just sit still. Now, once this is happening, you cannot have any interruption to your controller. If you so much as breathe the wrong way, your controller might pick that up and you might die. These are really pulse-pounding moments, and you have to be hyper-aware when you're playing this game. It's not like a movie you can throw on and just do something else in the background, because you have to be so aware of every single thing going on. So if it says don't move and you move, there was an example where it said don't move, you had to be completely still. I accidentally moved towards the end and I got somebody's face ripped off. I was really not happy about that. I was so nervous too. Like, it really gives you that anxiety, pulse pounding feeling because you are in control. Like, you can stop the bad thing that's going to happen, but you got to be quick about it. You have to be smart about it, and you have to have your wits about you. So, in addition to the don't move mechanism, I had a lot of trouble with climbing or running because you don't actually have to climb or run as your character, but you do have to hit certain buttons in time with the game, and if you don't do it and you slip up once, again, you could plummet to your very death. So you really do have to be in it. You really shouldn't have many distractions around you, otherwise you're not going to get very far, or you'll kill all your characters pretty early on, leaving not much of a story for the ending. So there are a lot of twists and turns that keep this story alive. All I'm going to say is that your characters, you don't know the truth about any of them until the very end. You don't really know what's going to happen to any of them, and no death, no matter how permanent it seems, is ever necessarily a real death. So that's something to keep in mind. My mind was absolutely broken when I saw some of the characters that I thought had died come back or survive the catastrophe I had inadvertently put them through. But there were other times where I was like, okay, there's no way that's survivable. Like, that was definitely it for that person. My intention when I went into this game was to save everyone. I knew that probably wasn't going to happen my first playthrough. I did end up saving 3 people, and the 3 people that ended up alive at the end of my playthrough were Emily, Ashley, and Chris. I wasn't totally upset about this. I didn't like Emily very much at first, but later on she proves herself to be a very, very strong and intelligent person. Chris and Ashley I liked from the jump. Chris was just naturally dorky and likable, and he didn't feel like he had really sour intentions to me. And Ashley is pretty much mostly innocent in all of this. So those were some pretty good saves. I didn't mind. I wish that I could have saved Matt. And I wish that I could have saved Sam. But everybody else, it was like, okay, you know, whatever happened, happened, and that's that. So there is a questionable fourth survivor. I might have not had, but you really have to play the game to understand that. Essentially, something happens to this person, and it's not pretty, but they don't technically die. Although, from what I'm understanding, that only happens in certain versions of the ending. There can also be choices you make that do lead this character to being fully killed off, and that's what I had thought I brought myself to, but like I said, this game shakes you up, it changes things on you, it makes you feel a lot of regret for your decisions or things that you just could have done differently. When I first started playing it, I was like, I'm fine if my choices affect the story, but I don't know about my failures, because I'm not very good at video games. I'm not very good at the quick jump, quick hit this button type thing. Just never been really coordinated. I don't drive. I'm 24 years old, if that tells you anything. I can't dance. I can't move like that. So I was really hoping that most of the story was based on what I said. But unfortunately, some of it is also what you do. Once you get the hang of the mechanics, it should be a little bit easy, but you're still going to get nervous. And I think, honestly, your nerves are your biggest thing against you here. In addition to everything I've just said, there are moments in between episodes where you will sit down with this therapist/psychiatrist looking dude, and he will ask you questions about what scares you, what doesn't scare you, what genuinely makes you uneasy, what makes you feel safe. This does influence the way the game goes. You can reverse psychology if you want, but I answered honestly because I felt like there was so much fun in me just facing everything that scared me the most. The one thing that I wish I hadn't done was answer honestly about how much gore disgusts me, because there was a ton of gore on account of that was what I said. There was one scene in particular I remember of a bear mangled, like just hanging open. There were bugs all over the place. All you could hear were flies. It was a nightmare, and I just kept hearing it in the back of my mind the whole time. So, some death scenes I want to highlight. If you don't like spoilers, maybe don't watch this part. I already spoiled a lot of it for you, so we're gonna put a warning spoiler thing in here somewhere. But yeah, so I'm about to really spoil it now. I got Matt killed. He was put on a meat hook, and his mouth filled up with blood, and since I saw that, it has still been replaying itself in my head. So that was probably the most disgusting death that I saw. There was just something about his mouth filling up with the blood that I was like, oh my god, that's like a nightmare. I got Jessica killed before I wanted to get her killed. I didn't like this character. She was very annoying. The acting was subpar. Actually, it was bad. I'm sorry, Megan Martin, who I grew up watching her on Camp Rock, so, you know, kind of weird to say, but just Jessica was not a likable character. However, she wasn't, like, outright bad, so I mean, I wouldn't have chosen to kill her off first. I would have chosen her boyfriend, but she's the one that I killed off first, and I think, like, it didn't really hit that hard, but I do feel like there's other things I could have done to prevent it, and so that's maybe one of my smaller regrets. And my biggest regret throughout the entire thing was how I moved and I couldn't save Sam from the Wendigo, who subsequently ripped her to pieces. That crushed me. I was so close to just rebooting the game, but guys, this was the final episode. We were like 2 minutes away from the end of the entire thing. I was like, if it's gonna happen, I just gotta let it happen. And you know, thinking back on that, maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have closed it out and tried to give her a better fate, just so I could have enjoyed myself and felt more rewarded in the end. But it just didn't work out that way, man. It just didn't work out that way. So yeah, Sam died, and it was because of me, and boo-de-doo. A shocking moment for me was there is a point where, much like a saw trap, Ashley is on one side and Josh, the sister of the girls who have disappeared, is on the other. And Chris has to pull a lever and decide who gets the saw across their middle. So no matter what you pick here, the saw is going to go to Josh. But you should really pick Ashley because Josh is gonna die either way, but Ashley will know if you didn't want to save her, and she won't help you subsequently. So, well, why I put die in quotations is because Josh doesn't actually die. This is a part of his sinister plot to get back at the people who pranked his sisters, because they did play a prank on them, ultimately leading them to their demise / disappearance. So you come to find out, actually, that though Josh doesn't necessarily die in the ending I got, he does turn into a Wendigo, and his one sister, Hannah, had not died when she fell off the mountain. She also turned into a Wendigo, and she appears later trying to viciously rip everybody to pieces. So what the fuck are you supposed to do, really? Beth, on the other hand, did pass away, and the scenes with her body and her head are just so disgusting. And you know what happens to people's eyes, like, after you die and it looks all filmy and smoky? That always really bothered me. It looks so just, ugh. And yeah, the corpse of Beth is a sight. I was eating dry ramen when I was playing this, and I had to stop multiple times because I was just like, that's disgusting. They definitely loaded my storyline with a ton of gore. Now, if you don't put that you hate gore, you might not get that outcome, but they loaded mine with it. So overall, I want to give this game, out of 10 stars, I'm going to give it an 8 because it was really awesome. I loved playing it. The only reason I took 2 stars off was the juvenile, like, kind of weird, awful, in my opinion, acting displayed by some of the characters in the beginning, and the laziness of the script, which gets better. The further you go on, the more you feel like these are actual people, and it gets way better. So you just gotta sift through that, and I think it's well worth it. So yeah, if you haven't played Until Dawn, you should definitely do it, and you should definitely let me know what outcomes you get. I'm gonna be going back to see if I can end things differently. But yeah. Overall, I can't wait to play the Quarry, and I cannot wait to play the Dark Pictures, which looks just as promising as this one did. So, if you guys know of any more Butterfly Effect games, definitely let me know. I'm looking to play a ton of games where I can make choices that influence how the game ends. So, if you haven't subscribed already, you should do that, because we blood sacrifice everybody that doesn't hit that button. Thank you! Have a nice day!